Hello, we are back with another album review. Now, I kind of hinted at this one in the last album review, which I did Shout by Devo. And today, we will be reviewing the Aquabats versus the Floating Eye of Death. That's a mouthful.
Out of the sky, the floating eye will prophesy and pretend that this is the end. The people run to the hills, run for their lives to flee the horrible eye.
So like in my last review, I'm going to give a brief history about the band. So the Aquabats were a ska band formed in Orange County, California by a Christian Jacobs and Chad Larson, also known as the MC Bat Commander and Crash McLarson. They have been the only band members who have been around since the beginning and are still around today. Anyway, they started at, not even joking, a friend's birthday party, or just a party, one of the two, where they're sitting in a pool. Commander just goes, "Let's form a band." So he's trying to think of a name, and he looks off into the water, says, "How about the Aquabats?" And that's how they were formed. I shit you not. So, they released 2 albums before this, which I will review eventually. This is what I think is their best album. So as you can see, they are fighting the Floating Eye of Death, who they would later reuse in their Super Show, which is probably why most people know them. It's how I found out about them. It was on The Hub, the other one. And that was a channel owned by Hasbro and Discovery, so they had a lot of Transformers and G.I. Joe shows on there. But the Aquabats Super Show was another show they had, and they had an episode where they fight the Floating Eye of Death here. Now, if you look on the back, so the Aquabats are superheroes, as you can see. And on the back, you have some of their villains. So you have Cyclopsis, who you may recognize as a design they later used for Muno in Yo Gabba Gabba. Yes, Yo Gabba Gabba was created by Christian Jacobs, the MC Bat Commander. So, not only him, but another villain named Obakimon was reused as Gooble. And Weedy the Broccoli Bee was used as Broby, which is interesting. So, also got Silver Skull, who would become an important villain in the Super Show. You got the Mauler, who they redesigned in the Super Show as a guy with a statue head on his body. Of course, at the Floating Eye of Death itself. Pumpkin Face. And in this car here, you can see the Sand Fleas, which I believe are their first villains they ever created. Anyway, this is a very unique album. It's their most experimental album. Because back then they only did ska with some rock elements. But this album they decided to branch out a bit. They kept some of the trumpets, but they mostly went for a rock sound. And then in Charge, their next main album, they did have another album in between, but it was B-sides and stuff, even though it had their 2 most famous songs on it. Yeah, I don't know how that works either, but point is, they eventually went to full punk, then they went to pop, and then they went back to ska. It's very weird. They also didn't really release a ton of albums while the show was being made. So there's a huge gap between High Five Soup and Kooky Spooky in stereo. Neither of those albums are that great, but I will review them eventually. So let's get on with the Aquabats versus the Floating Eye of Death. So in my last video, I talked about how I wasn't really able to decipher song meanings. It turns out, I'm just not good at deciphering Devo's meanings. But the Aquabats, however, their songs are never really deep, since I think about half of their songs have an actual meaning, and the other half are about their supervillains or weird adventures, which is why I like them. So, we're going to talk about Sequence Erase first, because that's the first track. Now, this is definitely one of the best songs on the album. It's very fast-paced, and it was originally a song they would perform live as a theme song. Sort of like what Devo did when Freedom of Choice and New Traditionalists were out. They had these instrumental theme songs they'd play at the beginning of those album tours. The Aquabats had Sequence Erase as their theme song, and you can hear the actual instrumental version. They wanted to put it on their album, but the record label said to add lyrics to it, and to be honest, I think they were right, because I actually like the lyric version way better. It's basically about how we waste time and how time is constantly moving, and we can't really stop it at all. So, it definitely has a message in there, which is, again, kind of rare for the Aquabats. This album does have a good amount of songs that have a somewhat deeper message. You can tell this is when they were experimenting. And a certain other song on here, it gets pretty dark. If you know this album, you would know exactly what song I'm talking about. So, Sequence Erase is definitely a great song. Definitely a great opener to the album. It's very fast-paced, very intense. I feel like you could use it in an action scene in a movie where there's like two giant armies rushing each other. I don't know. I have very specific things I come up with for songs. That's the autism speaking. Anyway. Yeah, so Sequence Erase is a great track.
Now we're talking. Now we're talking. Now we're talking inside of me.
Hey, so remember how I said their songs usually don't have a deeper meaning? Giant Robot Birdhead is about them building a giant robot to fight the floating eye of death. That's it. Simple as that. That's really all there is to it. So, Giant Robot Birdhead is a pretty good song. It kind of does transition from Sequence Erase. I like it when two songs are connected together. You know, if you listen to them at the same time, they like seamlessly lead into each other. And this kind of happens with Sequence Erase and Giant Robot Birdhead, but you know, not entirely. You know, not something like the last two tracks on their first album, which I definitely will review. That's a good album. But yeah, Giant Robot Birdhead is pretty good. So, it started as an early instrumental, which they used in their, I forgot exactly what it was called, but it sort of talked about their history as the Aquabats, showed some of their old sketches from a public access show called ROV, which is about ska bands, I guess. You know, stuff like that. But they had an early instrumental version of it, which they later released on the Other Rarities collection. I might review that, mainly because of a certain song. If you know me personally, you know exactly what song I'm talking about. And, yeah, they eventually made it into a full song. It is, there's not really much to say about it. It's a fun song. It's about a robot fighting a giant eyeball that turns people into zombies. You know, definitely give you a good idea of what the Aquabats are. They're superheroes who go on adventures and fight weird villains. You know, it's very campy, very, you know, it's just, you know, they're just a very fun band. I like them. So, I will say the song gets a little repetitive during the fall down kaboom parts. It does get a little kind of repetitive, but it's not anything terrible. I still really like the track.
What does it matter? It doesn't matter. What does it matter? As I matter. does it matter? What does it matter? Bam, bam, bam!
Antimatter is where they basically abandon ska completely. It's definitely a very punk, new wave sounding song. And it does have a kind of deeper meaning. We basically have all these material things, you know. You can see that I do. That's not pushed in all the way. Anyway, and, you know, we want all these expensive things, you know, and they mention in high school people trying to be popular or act tough. But in the end, it doesn't matter, because it's all going to go away soon, you know. Now, do I agree with the message of the song? No. It matters in the moment. This stuff will matter, because, you know, fuck streaming. And, yeah. But that's basically what the song's trying to convey, you know. In the end, it doesn't matter, which, you know, to an extent, maybe, but I don't know. I don't really have a comment on it, but it that's basically what it's trying to convey. And as a song, it's pretty good. It's got this nice guitar, this nice punk sound to it, you know. It's a good song. Just the message is a little odd, but not odd. I don't know how to describe it really, but it is a good song overall. Okay, we have another song that has no deep meaning, and it's just another Aquabats adventure. This one is about a talking magic green fish who lives in a bottle of noodles and grants wishes. This has got to be like the weirdest band in the world. I know people say B-52s is weird, but I don't know. I don't think anyone can really beat the Aquabats. There's something different about them. Anyway, Lotto Fever. It's a really good song, you know. I really like the instrumentals. And I like the guitars, you know. I know all this is kind of sounding repetitive. I like this, I like that, but what else am I supposed to say? I like the song. I don't have a lot to say about this song. I do think it's kind of weird how the wishes aren't granted immediately. Because at the end, he still says, he keeps saying he's waiting for the wishes. So, did the fish lie to him? I mean, that wasn't the case in the episode they based on the song. Because after the Super Show got canceled, they did a YouTube series, which you can go watch on their channel. And they did an episode about Lotto Fever. It was a little bit different from the song. And also the fish actually grants their wishes. And he injures Jimmy. Oh, just play the audio clip.
Jimmy's in a wheelchair and I don't care.
Anyway. It is a good song, though. The episode was kind of cool, too, but, you know, it is a really good song. Even if it's kind of confusing. Lovers of Loving Love is a love song about love. That's really it. There is nothing to say about this song. It's a good love song, and that's it. It's literally just about two people loving each other. So let's move on.
Chemical bomb. Eyes melt, skin explodes, everybody dead. It won't be long, it won't be long. People gonna run around losing their heads.
Okay, now this is the big one. So the Aquabats are known as this, you know, kids band. You know, they fight weird monsters. They do collabs with Weird Al. And apparently Mark Mothersbaugh is Jimmy's dad. You know, they appear on kids' YouTube channels. They collab with other kids' YouTube channels. They were on a kids' network, right? Well, in this album, you have a song about a nuclear explosion that melts people's faces off. There is a river of blood. And, yeah. So, they did not start off as a kids band. Especially in their first album, they had a song called Pinch and Roll. A song that teaches you how to scratch your balls. I am not making that up. There's also Cold Raw Gold, one of their demos, which is basically the commander having a mental breakdown because he isn't getting money by being in the Aquabats. And apparently he ripped his shirt off and punched himself in the face while singing it. The Aquabats has some crazy lore, I gotta tell you. Anyway, Chemical Bomb is definitely one of the best songs on the album. It's dark as hell. It basically is about the commander, because he sings all the songs, so I'm assuming he's the character, the main character in all these songs. He's in a supermarket thinking about, how humanity keeps starting wars with each other. And then he envisions a chemical bomb making people's eyes melt, skin explode, and everyone's dead. Stuff like that. You have some really dark lyrics in there, stuff you wouldn't expect from the Aquabats. It's even more jarring when they did their Pick the Setlist tour, which is a current one. They had Catboy and Chainsaw come back. That was kind of cool. But it was very recent. It was only a couple years ago. Way after the Super Show ended. So you see the new kid-friendly, Aquabats who were on a kids show singing about a nuclear holocaust. It was really jarring to see the new current Aquabats singing Chemical Bomb. But at the same time, I wasn't complaining because Chemical Bomb is a great song. It's got to be one of their best. Just how much of a tonal shift it is from literally every other song they've ever made. I mean, yeah, Cold Raw Gold is a little dark, but it didn't talk about people dying. It just talked about the commander's brain escaping or some shit. No. This song, it talks about people dying in very violent detail. It's just really jarring from the Aquabats, and I love it. This is definitely... I think it's a song most people think of when they think of this album. It's just very unique and different from anything else the Aquabats did because of how dark it is. And it kind of has this sort of Devo almost irony to it, because Devo is known for their satire and sort of ironic nature, like with Beautiful World, where they'd say, it's a beautiful world for you, not for me. Or Freedom of Choice, where freedom of choice is what you got, freedom from choice is what you want. Kind of... This has kind of that, except it's not as subtle. Instead, you have this really peaceful, serene sounding instrumental. And then you listen to the vocals, and it's about people exploding. You also have, I think the commander's daughter is the one who does the la 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 la. And that also adds to the sort of, irony to the instrumentals. Just how peaceful it sounds. It really is one of a kind for the Aquabats. I don't know. This is just a great song. It's got to be like the best song in this album. Just because of how, just the context of who the band is, what the song is like. It's just amazing. So we go from an Aquabats song about a nuclear holocaust to a song about a guy with glue on his hands. I don't like the song that much, to be honest. It has a lot of shouting. It has this really weird opening. I don't really get what the song is about. I guess it's about a guy with sticky hands. But then they talk about, like politicians or something. I don't even remember. I mean, I guess the instrumentals are kind of fine, but it's just kind of a weird song. I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, I like it somewhat, but compared to the rest of the album, especially compared to the last song, it just doesn't really stand out that much.
There she comes now with veil. She's walking up the aisle, so close now she winks. I recognize that smile.
Monster's Wedding is a definite highlight for me. So, it's another Aquabats adventure song. It's about Obakimon, who I mentioned earlier, taking just some random guy into an unknown portal so he can marry some monstrosity of a wife. I like how it's not made clear what she looks like. You just get the image of, the worst thing you can possibly imagine, and I like that. Now, at first I didn't like it because it was kind of slow, but listening to it more, I think it's one of my favorites on this album. The Aquabats are really good at storytelling through lyrics, and this is definitely a good story. It doesn't have a deep message, it isn't about a nuclear holocaust, no, it's just a Halloween song, basically. I think this song would be perfect for Halloween. In fact, I think I played it on Halloween. If you remember my Siri video, I was at a Halloween party. Kind of. I mean, we were really just passing out candy and we had some pizza, but I consider it a party. It was, But I played a bunch of spooky music, including some Oingo Boingo, which I will be reviewing some Oingo Boingo in the future. But Monster's Wedding it's just a really nice, spooky song, It's got a pretty interesting, storyline to it. And towards the end of the song, it does get faster paced. I always like to imagine that when it gets faster paced, it's the guy escaping from the monster realm. Fighting off all the monsters, escaping from the monstrosity of a wife. And when it slows down at the end, it's him just narrowly escaping through the portal. Again, this is not fact. This is just what I like to imagine when listening to this song. He's preparing himself for the wedding. And at the last second, before he can say yes to marrying this horrific beast, he punches someone in the face, runs off, and escapes on a giant fly or something. I always like to imagine that too. I do have a weird imagination, but at the same time, I don't think it's something the Aquabats wouldn't do. I mean, this could very well be an episode of the Super Show. They did fight giant ants, so someone riding on a giant fly would not be far-fetched in the slightest. So, again, that's what I like about the Aquabats. You can really use your imagination to come up with how these stories go. And the stories are so good, they adapt a lot of them into episodes. The Floating Eye of Death himself was in an episode of the Super Show. They had an episode based on Shark Fighter, Martian Girl. To mention, they had an episode based on Lotto Fever. Their songs are usually good things for plots, So, Monster's Wedding is a great song. It's definitely one of the highlights here.
Mr. Bunker's in the shade. Under a rock he starts his day. Not moving much with not too much to say.
guys know Bohemian Rhapsody, right? You know, that song by Queen, the one that everyone likes. This is the Aquabats version of it. So, if you know that song, you know it has a structure to it. So, it starts off as slow kind of ballad, then it goes into an opera. It's a little faster paced, and at the end it goes into hard rock. Ballad of Mr. Bonkers is exactly that, except it's a little shorter, and it's about a scorpion who wears pajamas. Again, this is the Aquabats. It's a good song. It's got to be one of the best. And shout out to Joe, who I mentioned in the last video. This is his favorite Aquabats song. So, shout outs to him. Anyway, Ballad of Mr. Bonkers is a great song. The lyrics are a little nonsensical, but, I mean, it's the Aquabats. What do you expect? But the actual song is great. It's got this, slow kind of old-fashioned ballad. It's got some trumpets, different horns in it. You can tell they still haven't fully left their ska roots yet. They still got the horns in there. Just not overly ska like the first two albums. And you get into the ballad, or the opera, it's a lot faster. You have these, choir people singing. And then you get to the hard rock part, and it's a good finisher to the song. It definitely sounds a lot like the original Queen song that this is based on. So, this is definitely a great song. I don't think it's the best on the album. I still think Chemical Bomb is, just, with all the context and its presentation, but this is definitely up there with the best on this album.
The domestication of the dog. We are the dogs. Oh yeah.
Dogs are great. Dogs are cool. And if dogs didn't exist, then neither would Canis Lupus by the Aquabats. And that's a great song. Does anyone else remember that video? Windows are real. Whether you believe it or not. People are going to think I'm insane if they haven't watched that video I'm referencing. It's on this channel. Go check it out. It's weird. Anyway, Canis Lupus is about dogs. I love dogs. I had 2 dogs. Both of them are gone now, but they were great dogs. And I even applied to work at a dog daycare. They didn't accept my application. But it was fun. The training was fun. So, I love dogs, and I love the song. It's a song about dogs. That's really it. It's a song about how great dogs are. And, yeah. That's it. You like dogs, you'll like this song. Simple as that. Tiny Pants is the worst song on this album. This album would be perfect if it weren't for Tiny Pants. This song is about a little man who makes obnoxious, stupid alien noises. And that's it. It's about the commander finding a tiny man who makes weird noises. And that's the song. Now, compared to some of their other bad songs on High Five Soup, we'll get to that album. I actually have it on the way. Because I need a CD to hold for effect. But compared to that album, this one's not that bad. I mean, High Five Soup isn't a bad album, but it does have their 3 worst songs on it, and those 3 songs are terrible. But Tiny Pants is tolerable. That noise he makes is obnoxious, but at the same time it's catchy, which is a problem. There are some songs you don't want to get stuck in your head. Like that one Oingo Boingo song. You know the one. And This song, you don't want to get stuck in your head, because you sing it in public, people are going to think you're insane. I mean, if you sing the actual lyrics, fine, but if you sing that alien part, yeah, people are going to think you're possessed. So, it's just, I don't know. I don't like it that much. I'll listen to it if it comes up in my shuffle or whatever. But, I don't like it. And I think a lot of people can agree it is easily the worst song on this album. Because this is a great album. So a track that's bad is obviously going to be the worst track on a nearly perfect album. And I have the hiccups, for fuck's sake. Anyway, moving on. It's the song with the slightly inconsistent title. Here it says, "The Thing on the Bass Amp." However, in the lyrics they say, "Thing in the Bass Amp." And they sometimes put that as the title. Anyways, this song is great. I recall knowing someone who was obsessed with this song. And I can kind of see why. It's a great song. It's probably one of the best on this album. You know, it's got this fast pace to it, sort of evil sound to it. It's got a lot of trumpets in it, which are horns. I usually can't tell the difference between horns. They all make a similar sound, but I think they're trumpets. It's just got a really, kind of evil sound to it. It does have a somewhat deeper meaning, too. So, it's essentially about how you make mistakes, but you don't want to blame yourself, so you want to look for someone else to blame. So you can blame the thing on the bass amp, which I don't know what the hell that means, but it's a message, at least. It's a really good track. Not much else to say. Amino Man's about a bodybuilder who is obsessed with getting buff, I guess. It's a good song. Kind of a simple plot. There isn't really much to the plot, really. Compared to the other weird, like, Monsters Wedding or Giant Robot Birdhead, this one's just kind of when it comes to the story. Now, the actual song is good. It is a really good track. It's just, there's no message to it, and the story to it is just kind of weak. So, it's a little bland, but I do like it. Well, here we are. Hello, Good Night is a masterpiece. Now, I know a lot of people said it was mid, or just not that great. Shut up. This song is great. So, this actually has some context behind it. You see, the Aquabats are pretty obscure, as you may know. But they were even more obscure in the 90s because they didn't have the Super Show. They also didn't have Pool Party or Pizza Day. They did have Super Rad, but that got them only moderate success. And they were just not doing well financially, as reflected in Cold Raw Gold. So this is basically them saying goodbye to the world, because they thought this would be their last album. So, yeah, it is kind of sad when you think about that. Now, luckily, this was not their goodbye, as they did release Myths and Legends, which had Pool Party and Pizza Day, which put them on the map. They then made Yo Gabba Gabba, and they made the Super Show, and they actually found some decent success. They're still not well known by the general audience, but they do have a sizable fan base now. So that's good. I'm glad they do, because they are one of my favorite bands. The other is Devo. And they are also Devo fans, so I'm pretty sure they would be happy about that. Because they did a cover of Love Without Anger, which is what got me into Devo in the first place. Anyway, so it is a really good closure track, a closing track to the album. It's very slow, very peaceful, and I want it played at my funeral. I'm not even exaggerating about that. This would be a good song to play at my funeral. Take notes, any family members who may be watching this video. Anyway, yeah, this is a really good song. You know, it's sad, but it's also hopeful at the same time. You know, there is a glimmer of hope in the song saying we may, you know, indicating we may meet again, which was the truth, because they're still around to this day, although I think their new album might be their last, considering it's called Finally, and the track talks about how this is their last stand, and considering they've been doing this for like 30 years. But the point is, this is a really good ending track to a nearly perfect album. I give this album a 9 out of 10.
So close your eyes, 'cause it's alright to say hello. Good night.
If it weren't for Tiny Pants, this would easily be a 10 out of 10 album. But it does bring it down a bit. It still is a great album, and it's easily the Aquabats' best album. That concludes this album review. My next one will be of an artist that's somehow more obscure than the Aquabats. I didn't think that was possible, but yeah. Anyways, I will see you boyos in the good there.
It's real! I knew it!